Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking Marty for inviting us to speak today about the theory of our book, The Communication Panacea, General Semantics and Pediatrics. After presenting some aspects of the book last year, I was excited when he asked me to come again, and this time with my co-author, Isaac. Marty thought this was a good idea since the book is about the uses of general semantics in the practice of pediatrics, and the basis of the entire book is found in the stories and experiences of the medical doctor among us, my dad. And as opposed to last year, the book is actually out and here, so it's exciting twofold. It's been 10 years since Isaac retired from the hospital, and just a few months since he retired from his private practice. In the course of these years, the world of medicine has seen many developments in both medical research and healthcare technology. There are data-rich wearable devices and sensors, open platforms that integrate the data from patients' devices directly into their electronic health records, and technologies to aid health communication, including social media, which is said to lead to empowered, engaged, and better informed patients. And there has been a growth in mobile marketing health apps that can be used for medical and drug reference, to share electronic health records data, images and video, and other resources with patients. But alongside these technological developments, there's a constant rise in patient dissatisfaction, as well as in doctor burnout and depression. Medical care is increasingly depersonalized, and communication between doctors and patients ineffective and dehumanized. We have chosen to present two stories here today and to show again how useful general semantics can be in alleviating the problem. Moreover, we hope to show that the GS outlook on medicine helps clarify what is meant by all of those who are calling for the humanizing of medicine, something Isaac spent his professional life striving to do. The first story is Danny's story, and I will ask Isaac to be the one to tell it, as well as the second. These were, after all, his patients.
Danny was a charming 5-year-old. He was communicative, friendly, and generally healthy. He had been a good sleeper since birth, but when he came in with his father one day, he seemed sad and his father exhausted. I had barely said hello. They had just sat down across from me, and the father had already made it very clear why they had come to see me. Danny wasn't sleeping well, and as a result, neither was the rest of the family. There was a pattern. Danny was put to bed every night around 8 p.m. and fell asleep easily. But for the past month or so, he was waking up 2 to 3 times every night, crying and screaming. At first, the parents came to his bedroom, consoled him for a few minutes, and went back to bed. On the second night, they took his temperature and found that he had no fever. They brought him a glass of water, caressed him for a while, and by the second week, the parents were taking turns sitting next to Danny and helping him back to sleep a few times a night. And they were getting worried. Trying not to have the entire family awake for the whole night, they did not go into long conversations with Danny at night. They talked to him over breakfast, attempting to understand from him what it was that was bothering him, to no avail. The only reply they was getting to their guiding questions was a shy, "I don't know." The parent had, by that point, developed a complex theory. They had made an appointment to talk to Danny's kindergarten teacher and ask her about Danny's behavior. Was he playing with his friends? Had any of the kids made fun of him? Were the teachers paying attention to him? They had spoken also to Danny's babysitter, suspecting she was mistreating him. By the third week, they were scared and exhausted, and the tension was getting the best of them, and they were arguing and fighting all the time. I listened to the father quietly for a while, and then turned to Danny, aware of how nonverbal communication, especially in pediatrics, can automatically enhance the relationship with the child. I positioned myself so that I was looking at Danny directly at eye level, rather than standing and towering over him. And I simply asked, "Who wakes you up every night?" To which Danny immediately replied, "A bad lion scares me. He wants to swallow me." Apparently uncomfortable about how quickly I had gotten an answer from Danny, the father immediately interjected that Danny had mentioned a lion and that they had explained to him that the lion did not exist and it was only a dream, but it hadn't helped. I faced Danny again, smiled at him, and out of the drawer where I keep lollipops, balloons, and toys, I pulled out a little stuffed toy lion. Holding it away from Danny, waiting to see his reaction, I said, "I am going to help you. Starting tonight, you can go to sleep holding this lion. I have told the lion that his job is to protect you and chase away the bad lion every time he comes around. This lion is very strong, so you will be able to sleep well if he is with you every night." Danny didn't smile, but he reached for the toy, and by the time they left the office, he was holding it tight. 5 days later, Danny's father called to report that Danny was still waking up at night, but was falling asleep within minutes, and that for the last 2 nights, they hadn't even had to come into his room. By the time Danny came back for his next visit, there were no more bad dreams. He had started first grade. We talked about school, about his teachers, about his friends, his birthday party, and the recent soccer game.
As you can probably tell, this was a self-reflexive process. Danny's parents were spiraling and making things worse by the language they were using to try to explain their son's lack of sleep. As Krzyzewski described it, using language is like being in a mirrored room. Language is self-reflexive. Danny's parents had moved very fast from the low level of abstraction that was the fact that Danny was waking up in the middle of the night to the high level of abstraction where they thought perhaps someone was abusing their child or that there was a very serious problem underlying his lack of sleep. Their fears and their entire family life would be disrupted. Their fears that their entire family life would be disrupted had become a self-fulfilling prophecy, as they were constantly tired, worried, having trouble functioning at work, and projecting their concerns onto Danny during the day. They had made a prediction that was coming true because they had made the prediction. Self-reflexiveness is a semantic process by which we try to order and control our world. The parents had started generating expectations because this was their way of preparing themselves for what would happen to them. But their world had started to become even more disorganized and unpredictable as they were not aware of what they were doing and how they were doing it. They were creating what they had expected. Isaac did not point out to the father that this is what what he and Danny's mother were doing, but he had stopped the spiral first by building a relationship not only with the parent, but also with the patient. The point was to not only collect data, but to make a connection in which both Danny and his father felt respected, supported, and trusting. And he did this by seeing the child and listening to him, by showing him he was really interested in him and turning him into an active participant in his own care. But he did more than that. He paid attention to the degree of specificity of Danny's utterances. These were low in abstraction, and so they denoted the color and texture and uniqueness of what was bothering him. This allowed Isaac to descend even further on the ladder of abstraction, all the way down to the nonverbal level, where he found the lion toy. And then he called the lion a good lion. Things do not have real names, but things and the names we give them are hard to separate. What we call things affects how we perceive them. We identify names and words with things. And so, if we change the names of things, we change how people regard them. And this is as good as changing the nature of the thing itself, in this case, the dreams. Isaac had generated a new and useful way of perceiving the lion in the dream. He had altered the imagery, and by doing so, he had dissipated the fears. Perceiving the problem from various levels of abstraction, he had used both first and second order thinking. He first worked within the framework of Danny's world, accepting the assumptions on which it was based, but then he went outside the frame of the problem and, drawing on resources not contained in the original frame, suggested an alternative narrative. By changing the words, or in this case, adding a good lion to the bad, he reframed the problem and found a solution. Here's another example of how general semantics thinking leads to better practices and the humanization of medicine. The technological developments in the field of in vitro fertilization have dramatically increased the number of multiple births throughout the world over the past 3 decades or so, and this has been the case especially in Israel, where we both live. The world's first IVF baby was born in the United Kingdom in 1979, and just 4 years later, Israel's first IVF baby followed. Since then, Israel has become a world leader in IVF treatments. Israel has multiple fertility centers, more clinics per capita than any other nation, and it also has the highest per capita rate of IVF procedures. In Israel, both married and single women up to the age of 45 are permitted virtually unlimited IVF attempts, and not just for a first baby, but for subsequent babies too. Women from the ages of 45 to 51 are permitted to continue treatments with donated ova, and there are no waiting lists. The State of Israel provides health care along the continuum from family planning services through childbirth, and much of the reproductive care is funded by the government and through health funds. This reproductive care policy reflects Jewish religious, cultural, and social norms regarding fertility, as parenthood is considered a basic human right based on biblical and other Jewish religious sources. Beginning with the verse, "And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it," Genesis, and all the way to the policies of the modern state of Israel. The personal desire for parenthood and especially motherhood has been ingrained in Jewish culture, strengthened further by the historical persecution of Jews in the diaspora, the Holocaust, and the continuing loss of life over the long Arab-Israeli conflict. A person's right to procreate, especially the superior right to motherhood, has been recognized in Israeli Supreme Court rulings, just in parentheses, as opposed to the right to choose abortion. This combination of reproductive technology, religion, culture, ideology, and policy has led to an increased incidence of multiple births in the country. And this is the backdrop for our next story.